I'm not usually one to jump on the hype train, but knew I needed to see this with everything that I was hearing. Plus, an original movie was finally in theaters. And y'all, what I was greeted with was a celebration of heritage, culture, history, and music, all wrapped up in a compelling story and some of the best vampires that I have seen in a very long time. I am so glad that I got a chance to see it in theaters because the color palette, the cinematography, the setting is absolutely gorgeous. Visually, this movie transports you to the time and place that you are in. It is like this character that's sitting alongside everything else that's going on and allows you to suspend your disbelief. And sometimes that means that you truly are getting uncomfortable in these moments because it feels like you are in this time and place. So this movie is set in the 1930s South, and that is a very uncomfortable time. See, this story is so effective because the straightforward layer of horror, vampires, sits nestled inside of layers of other horror. Ryan Coogler has gone on record to say that he was inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing, as Ryan Coogler has gone on record to say that he was inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, that's a movie that very famously also has layers. Part of what makes that movie so effective is the actual villain, the actual bad guy, the actual supernatural antagonist is sitting within a context of a perilous, frightening, and all around terrible situation. That's exactly what we have here. That's where I think the setup for this movie is so beautiful. And that's why I think the setup for this movie and the pacing of this movie is beautiful. I'm hearing a lot of mixed reviews. So you basically spend half of the movie setting up the premise and the situation and the characters all for the big kickoff to the actual monster movie portion of the film. And you need to do that in order to fully and completely appreciate the story and context that you are in. Because yes, you have the immediate threat of the vampires at the core of what is happening. But even within that core, you still, and the thing about the layers of horror in this movie is that it doesn't shy away from the realities of the 1930s South. That is one of the strongest parts of this movie that lends to every single layer of the story that's being told here. It has to. In order to be authentic to what is actually going on, it has to be authentic to the time and the situation and the context that the story is being presented in. And then you take that setting and you pepper in tropes that, if you've seen that style of movie, are straight down the middle, but those are combined with interesting twists along the way, concepts that take what is established or known or what you would think is going to happen or what you would think is going to be presented and shifting it or adding to it that amplifies the sum total of everything that's happening on the screen, that gives even more depth and even more life to this film. And I say film because, y'all, there are movies and then there is cinema. There are movies and then there is film. And Ryan Coogler presented us with a film because this movie hits on a variety of different levels, telling the story that he wanted to tell. And we're setting up that Preacher Boy lives in two worlds. He is an all around nice guy. He's a family guy. He works hard. His dad's the preacher, but he loves the blues. He loves music. And it's almost like this dichotomy between a purer soul juxtaposed with the Smokestack Twins, Michael B. Jordan in Two Halves. Now, I didn't know what to expect when watching two different roles out of Michael B. Jordan, but This man hits it out of the park. This is probably my favorite role that I have ever seen Michael B. Jordan in. But with the Smokestack Twins, we already get the influence of spirituality and religion throughout this entire movie because this entire movie, from A to Z, from soup to nuts, is peppered and soaked in religious and spiritual undertones. So the story involves Elijah, known as Smoke, and his twin brother, Elias, known as Stack, who are the fact that one's name is Elijah, which is a Hebrew name, and the most famous Elijah is the prophet from the northern kingdom of Israel in the 9th century BC. And so, and then his identical twin, Elias, which is actually the Greek form of that name, Elijah, which is a beautiful touch. And these two have this air about them that they are returning to the area and they're not people to mess with. They have seen some things, they've done some things, and along the way, we find out that they're part brother, part soldier, part criminal, part scoundrel. And a side note about the way that these two are fully fleshed out and some of the clever work that this movie does, they worked alongside Spotify, right? This movie is absolutely about music and has so much to offer. So they actually worked alongside Spotify and put out a series of faux articles, like newspaper articles, that flesh out different little pieces that are thrown in throughout the movie, right? It's alluded to that they made their money robbing banks and that they worked for Al Capone and that they knocked off some alcohol shipments and that's how they got all of this alcohol that they were returning back with and all of this sort of stuff. But they do this brilliant job of bringing in a different form of media and making the audience work for it a little bit while also lending even more depth to this world and saying, okay, we are couching this in a very real reality in American history. And we are going the extra mile to present it as if you are looking at something that is historical in nature. I'll admit I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not always the biggest Michael B. Jordan fan, and I thought Michael B. Jordan playing twins was just going to be MBJ doing MBJ things. But the level of depth and nuance to these two characters, even down to the color palette choices. So the one's wearing red, and along the way, he loses the right garbs, but his eyes are piercing blue, which blue is the color of the other twin. And along the way, he loses the blue, but gets soaked in blood. So now he's the one that has red on him. And now in 2025, when you hear the word allegory, you can pretty safely assume that it's going to be one of three things: politics, religion, or racism. And while there are elements of two of the three of those, the third is kind of comes along with the whole racist thing, but very evident that the whole religion and racism thing is a part of the conversation. There's absolutely a world where it's only as straightforward as black and white, literally, where this is going to be straightforward. One is an allegory for one is an allegory for the other. This is the direction that we're going. But they take the time to tell a deeper story than that. Yes, that's a part of it. Yes, that story is being told, but there's something more nuanced happening as you peel back the layers. And I, for one, had the distinct pleasure of going to see this with my very Irish wife, who actually said to me once we got out of the movie that she really appreciated that everybody that was depicted throughout the entirety of this movie that we followed along with would have been considered a second class citizen in the 30s. And that's the lens that we're introduced to our big bad, so to speak, throughout this movie, Remick, who knocks on the door of a couple and sees the Klan outfit and appeals to their racist nature, talking about how he's being hunted down by Native Americans who end up stopping by and they basically shoo them off. And that's where we come to find out that he's actually a vampire and we are off to the races. And it's that deeper note that goes past just racism into colonizing, into appropriation of heritage, and denying somebody who they are and where they're from, or basic freedom and that deep desire for freedom and community. where this movie thrives. And it's at that level that you start to get the heritage of the people that are involved. So the Smokestack twins go with Sammy, who goes with their cousin. So you find out that Sammy and the twins are cousins, and the father's warning him, do not go, do not play the blues, do not do these things because you are going down the road of the devil. And we'll get to the long history of Christianity and blues jazz music, but we see the twins, they want to start up this club, this juke joint, they want to set something up and make a life for themselves there. And along the way, he's recruiting all of these people. They're bringing in your cast of characters that you're going to follow throughout the course of this evening. And so along the way, as they're recruiting people and fleshing out the world, and we're meeting all of these people, this is where we get the involvement of the different religious practices. Now, I know that this is an area of the movie that can make some people feel very uncomfortable, especially in the West, because it is very commonplace that if you see the depiction of religion, you are going to see a straightforward Judeo Christian approach. That is not the approach that this takes, though Christianity is involved. There's like 6 spiritual practices that are involved in all of this. There's hoodoo, vampirism, the religion of the Choctaw people, Christianity, the KKK, and blues music being presented as like this spiritual path unto itself. And there are a lot of people who view it exactly like that. And in order to be authentic, you need to give credible weight to each one of those as aspects of things that would have been prevalent at this time or people would have been practicing at this time, especially in this place. And so Annie's this hoodoo priestess, and she's going to be the mouthpiece for flushing out a lot of the religious aspects of this movie as we go through the process of flushing out the evening and as we meet the vampires. And one thing I think this movie does well is it gives a voice to each one of the practices. So Annie, the estranged wife, is the hoodoo priestess. Remick is the vampire lord. Now, the Choctaw people only show up for a scene, but they are also an influence on the story. The dad is the voice of Christianity. You've got the clan. And then you have this underlying. Now, you could argue that Delta Slim was the voice for blues, as Sammy is being influenced by the different themes around him in all of these different aspects as he's going on this spiritual journey himself, kind of going through a more pure state. And then as the night goes on, moving further and further into like debauchery, right? This we see this idea of sinners and the unclean going on as the night goes on all through to like this new day, but it's not that same level of purity. You're out on a new day, and now I'm saying goodbye to all of these things, and I have seen the light in the air of my ways. It leaves all of it ambiguous, with the only real straightforward statements that are being made sitting at the level of racism and colonizing. As we follow Sammy, we see him leave the nest, go with the brothers, go through this entire night, go back to the church, be embraced by his dad, having this moment where he's like clinching onto the last remnants of this guitar for like dear life, as if it's like the last piece of his soul. And then we fast forward, and he's an old man, and he leaned into the whole blues thing, but we're never actually told how it all went down. You could read it as he just ended up rejecting the whole Christianity thing to go the way of blues, or that he just went his own path and he's been influenced by each one of these pieces as he's done his own path. It's all ambiguous on purpose. And so the party's going, right? And that's where we get this amazing scene, this masterpiece in cinematography. Sammy starts playing, and you see it looks like the barn that they bought was is on fire, burning down. And it's this symbolism of freedom. And he's playing the blues, and all the while you're starting to see different introductions of different points of influence that have been taken from the blues. You see a guy with an electric guitar, you see a rapper, you see hip hop guys, you see a DJ, you see rock and roll. Each one of these areas drawing their roots and their influence from the blues. And it's this picture of music uniting generations, that the blues is this force of nature that unites people. And it plays on this opening monologue that we get that talks about how music can communicate and transcend time, but it can also attract great evil. And this is where we have to talk about the vampires. Classic Bram Stoker style vampires. So these three come and they are just trying to get in, right? They seem like a band of traveling musicians just trying to come in and have a good time. They look at face value to be harmless. But see, here's the thing. When they show up, this is where the background themes of spirituality that are introduced become very real. So they're classic Bram Stoker style. They're immortal in a sense. They don't age. They have fangs. They can jump really far. They have to be invited inside the building. They're repelled by garlic. If they bite you, you die and you come back as a vampire yourself. And they can only be killed by either a stake through the heart or by sunlight. But there's something interesting here with these vampires. And again, this is where we get to the deeper storytelling at play. They offer a sort of false salvation in a way. They say, let us bite you. Remick keeps saying things like, let us bite you. Let us make you into one of us, and you will join us in our musical community of love, free from oppression of the world, free from the racism of people like the Klan and others, a kind of eternal life, a kind of heaven on earth, a utopic living. That's what they're claiming to offer. And it's that level of freedom that is at the heart and desire of everybody in different ways, in different forms, be it literal freedom or freedom from the life that they feel trapped in. But it's a false promise because these reanimated corpses of the night are a far cry from the biblical idea of resurrection. And this is where we get that Judeo Christian influence because the creatures are presented in a way that gives major sin crouching at the door vibes, right? It seems harmless at face value, but there's this undercurrent where just nothing seems right about these three. And that's what everybody's picking up on. And again, I think that speaks to how well done this movie is and how unafraid it is to touch on a variety of different spiritual influences, because this is so reminiscent of Genesis 4, that sin crouching at the door aspect of the story of Cain and Abel. And you can go deeper with the Christian influence of all of it. And you can go deeper with the Christian undertone to what's happening here because they're offering the world. They're offering all of these things. But like it says in Matthew, what good will it be if somebody gains the whole world yet forfeits their soul? What can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And this seems to dawn on Sammy because remember, we're watching his spiritual journey. They call him Preacher Boy. It's his dad that runs the church. But for a moment, and for a moment, he regrets not heeding his father's advice. He believes at certain points that the devil has indeed found him in the form of these vampires. And to become a vampire, to join them, would be to sell his soul. And along the way, as all of this is playing out, we see a lot of people end up falling to the vampires. A lot of people end up getting converted into vampires. We have Mary, who goes out trying to check and see if they're actually on the up and up because she picks up on the fact that they need the money. They need somebody coming in who can actually pay their bill with real money and wants to see if everything is actually on the up and up. And so she goes out there, realizes that these people are not on the up and up, but it's too late because she's out there alone with three of these vampires, comes back in, nobody realizes that she's been turned. She's alone with Stack and ends up converting him. And we get this big battle play out along the way. But there's an interesting twist involved in all of this. See, the vampires in this world, when they take somebody and they convert somebody, it's a hive mind. And we're introduced to this through Grace and Bo, the Chinese American couple who's involved in all of this. That's being predicted everybody that's being presented in this entire group would have understood the issues and pain of colonizing, of being treated as lesser than or second class. When Bo is taken and converted, now suddenly Remick has all of that knowledge about their kid, and he knows how to speak Chinese, and it's this really interesting vehicle for being able to double down on this idea of we are one people, we are one shared community. And there's this wild and out final battle that takes place where pretty much nobody is left standing. It is gory. There is carnage candy everywhere. It is the vampire movie portion of this film. And it leads to this scene where Sammy gets out, and the last we see of the brothers, they're locked in battle, right? It looks like Smoke's about to take out Stack, and on the idea that Sammy gets away, he's got to make it out, and so he makes it out, and he's in these waters, with Remick. And this is where we get Remick's backstory. See, he's Irish. And it didn't dawn on me again. My very Irish wife was the one who mentioned to me, like, "Oh, hey, yeah, this makes sense. They were colonized by the expansion of Christianity and the British, and that whole way of life was forced upon them. And that's why we get this dialogue that where he's saying the Lord's Prayer, and he talks about how he hated the men who forced those words on him, but the words brought him comfort. And he and Sammy are engaged in this perverse baptism sort of scene where he's just dunking him under the water. And right as it looks like Remick is about to win, Sammy hits him with this guitar that he's had this entire time, that he thought was won by the brothers, that was given to him by the brothers as this gift. And it turns out it belonged to his uncle, the brother's dad, who is depicted as this evil person who Smoke had to kill in order to protect his little brother. And so these two, and so he hits him, and the plating on it's silver, so it does damage. And just then, Smoke comes and runs him through with a stack straight through the heart. And then the sun rises and kills most of the vampires. We think that the vampires are done. They go their separate ways. Smoke goes after the clan who came to kill the brothers. He takes them all out in this scene where he's got the dog tags. He takes off the mojo bag, almost like symbolic, like he's done. He doesn't want anymore. He doesn't want the protection anymore. Again, it's insinuated that this mojo bag has kept him safe all of these years. And so he rips it off and he goes in on the clan members, takes them all out, but in the process, he's fatally wounded. And he has this vision of Annie nursing their daughter. But again, it's ambiguous. It's not doubling down on any one specific aspect of the spiritual atonement, because we don't know if this is a confirmation of Annie's hoodoo belief system and her vision of the afterlife, or if it's a hallucination. And as for Sammy, and it's all very prodigal son coded, returning home to the father, but it doesn't present it as if he's running back to the correct option and the correct practice, because he's standing in front of the church and he's holding this guitar and he's being told, leave behind your sinful ways. And then we cut forward. And then we cut forward 60 years to this blues club where we get a legend in blues music, Buddy Guy, up on stage. And we see the scars left behind from that night. And so we know this is old Sammy. And he's playing those blues, man. He he wraps the set and he's sitting at the bar, and the bouncer comes and says that there's a couple of people trying to get in. They want to come in, they want to have a drink. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. And then he hears the bouncer saying, yeah, you can come in, and he knows what's up. This is another spot where it very easily could have devolved into the trope of one last standoff. We have to kill the rest of the vampires. And for as much as it would have been schlocktastic to see Buddy Guy take out a couple of vampires, it plays it straight that this is more like a family reunion, and that his brother made him promise that he would let Sammy live out his life. And with Remick dying, it took away that desire to go after Sammy and to kill. And they just have been living for the last 60 years, watching from afar, watching him grow up and play his music. And we get this touching scene where they talk about how for a couple of hours that day, they felt like they were truly free. And we see that he had the guitar repaired and he plays the blues, man. Just it's this last moment between family. And they offer him whether or not, and they offer him the opportunity to live forever, to become a vampire, to play music forever. And he straight up says, I don't want that. I've seen enough. And that's it. And they go their separate ways. And then we get a post-credit scene with Miles Canton playing This Little Light of Mine, who seriously, Miles Canton is the breakout star of this. I've never heard anything from this cat before. And this dude lit it up between his performances, his acting, his music, all of it from A to Z. Absolutely stunningly amazing job. And so this leaves us with the backbone of this movie, the music. So I'm a blues musician. I spent many a night playing at blues clubs and after hours over a bottle of whiskey, hearing about the origins of the craft, hearing about grandparents who would sing spiritual songs and the background of this music from these old heads that just spent their whole life just playing those blues. And on that level, this movie spoke to me. This is a celebration of blues. Yes, there is also the combination of that colonization conversation needing to take place here because so many different groups of people along the way have co-opted blues and taken it and spun off into different successful forms. And there's truth to Delta Slim's one line that there are a lot of people who like the blues, but not everybody likes where they came from or who plays them. Delroy Lindo is seriously the sleeper of this entire movie. This dude did an amazing job and is such a heartbeat of this movie. And then on top of all of the influence that blues had on this movie, you have the combination of Coogler with his normal collaborator, Ludwig Göransson. He has composed some of my favorite movie soundtracks of present day. And this dude, he this dude gets it. He was raised by a dad who played the blues. His dad was a guitar instructor who loved the blues. He started off playing heavy metal and then got into blues. And it's just this love letter to the art form. And it is an art form. And it is an art form that inspired, again, rock and roll, hip hop, rap, and all of that should be celebrated in a story that is centered around this art form and the people of the time and the art form. Not to mention, you're talking about something that's so spiritually packed and loaded. Of course, you're going to have blues music. There is a long standing, storied history between Christianity and blues. A lot of people think it's the devil's music. There's a lot of people who still to this day think that if you play it, you're going to sell your soul to the devil. It's the music that attracts demons, stuff like that. And not everybody realizes that there are absolutely beats of that that are born out of racist thinking. There are absolutely beats of that that are born out of this disgusting point in America's past, where even people of color argue this because they see other people as uncivilized that are engaging in all of this, that are engaging in these juke joints and that style of music, that's all debauchery. This movie, from start to finish, this movie is awesome. This movie is exactly what those of us that have been rallying for original storytelling. This movie is exactly what those of us that have been rallying for original storytelling have been looking for. Yeah, sure, you can draw some comparisons. There's a comparison that's being made around that this is like From Dusk Till Dawn, where it's one sort of movie and then dovetails into a vampire movie. But I don't think that's fully accurate. The more I sit with this movie, I don't think that's actually fully accurate because outside of the vampire movie, it's trying to tell a different story along the way. It's trying to tell a deep and rich and thematic and historic story along the way. Do I think that there are some parts of this movie that maybe could have done with a little bit of editing, maybe were a little bit excessive, maybe were a little bit clunky? Sure, I could nitpick this movie. But as a whole, this is a win for original storytelling. This is the first time that Ryan Coogler has been able to helm a movie that was not franchise or IP driven. And that I will always, always champion. That is This is a story from a person who wanted to tell their story and did so all in all very well.